New rules for fort building have just been announced in Rise of Kingdoms, and I, for one, could not possibly be more happy with a change to the way that forts work. For literally years now, I have been saying that the fort meta is not as fun as actually fighting for flags. So in this video, I'm going to explain it all. What are these new rules? Why are they so important? And why perhaps are these changes happening now? Stick around in this video for everything you need to know about the Alliance Fortress meta and how it's changing in Rise of Kingdoms. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and I have been saying for literally like 3 years now that in my opinion, the fort meta is kind of toxic. You drop, no kidding, dozens upon dozens of forts per kingdom in a KVK, and often it is in fact common to see hundreds of forts on a map, and the game is no longer about fighting over flags, which in my opinion is very fun. A flag can only last for like an hour when it's burning. It matters, whereas a fort lasts for a day. So you can't blame players for trying to exploit the power of a fort by stacking fort upon fort upon fort upon fort upon fort upon fort upon fort, and then just keep saying that over and over and over, so that an entire zone is not a fight of flags, it is a fight of forts, because a fort takes a day to burn. So, why are the developers suddenly breaking this up, and what exactly are they doing? And is it even enough? Let's start with, what are they doing? So, today, when you build a fort occupies, as you can see here, a 5x5 grid. Many of you may not know this if you haven't built territory, but the map is technically divided up into a grid. Now, you can place buildings in really like anywhere you want on this grid, as long as there's not a blocking object. It can be in, like the upper left portion of one of these squares. It could be in the middle of the square. It could be to the right of the square. A part of what makes this game fun is like, yeah, there's a grid system just for practical purposes to mark off territory and stuff. But like, you actually have a lot of freedom on where you can put things. And this is why, by the way, people are able to drop forts in really weird locations in KVK, is people don't realize that like, somehow they're able to build a fort where the base of the fort is like just outside of the existing territory, and you drop down your fort. And that gets us started on the rules for forts. What are the rules anyways? Well, you can't build a fort or really anything on territory that already is there. The base of the fort cannot go on existing territory or an area marked off for building territory. Now, territory gets really, really complicated, and I'm probably going to get some of this wrong as I try to go into it, so I'll try to avoid going into too much depth. But there is, suffice to say, some weirdness you can do with basically using flags to eat up sort of building territory, and then you delete the flags, and you can end up with this situation where forts are on top of each other. It's actually kind of complicated. Let me try to explain this. The way that you could create this weird fort situation you see here, with two forts on top of each other's land, is two strategies. One is you just make them both from the same alliance. If they're both from the same alliance, then you could put these two forts on each other's land and like it's fine. But the way that people are cheating the system today, and you can't blame players for doing it because it's straight meta, it's powerful, is you start building, for example, Fort B. The territory has a dotted line. You build a bunch of flags, I think, with like Alliance A. Those flags complete, and because they complete before Fort B is completed, you now have completed land, and you build those flags like just off of the B dotted lines, okay? But the A land now eats up the B land because it's built, and then you can drop an A fort. And then you finish the A fort and you finish the B fort, and like, voila, you have two forts on top of each other. There are probably many other ways. I'm out of touch with like, how do you cheat forts in the game? And it drives me a little bit insane. So a part of me really doesn't want to know how you exploit territory. It is just exhausting. It's not for me, okay? It's not the part of the game that I'm really into. But the point I'm trying to make here is that you can do all these things to cheat out forts on top of each other, which is insanely powerful at passes It is insanely powerful anywhere that you want to go and stop an enemy from getting by. Because now, if an enemy wants to get progress, they can only get one square or one row of progress at best. Not a full fort length of progress, a row of progress, which means it's literally impossible to break through an enemy's fort line before a new zone potentially opens. You can just cheat the system and build as many forts as you want, and that's what people do today. Now, the new rule is that you cannot build a fort that would touch the base of another fort. Now, this is important to understand, right? Remember, there's a grid system, a 5x5 grid system. The base of the fort will be the centermost grid. Okay, that's where your base of the fort is going to be. And you cannot do, as you see here, build Fort A in a way that touches the base of Fort B. But what you can do is you can have their territory overlapping, apparently, and as long as it's not touching the base of the fort, as long as it's not overlapping with the base square of the fort, you're good. Which means that now you would get at least 3 rows of progress, or maybe 2 rows of progress, perhaps. I don't know, it depends on how you build these forts. Instead of all the progress you can get today, instead of 1 row, you can now get 2 or 3. This is a good thing. This is, in my opinion, a very good thing. It is reducing the amount of forts that are necessary. Now, this, by the way, was announced in the official Rise of Kingdoms Discord. This is super real, not just a player image. Let me show you. Greetings, governors. Changes are coming to the Alliance Fortress system. Under the new rules, Alliance fortresses cannot be built within the territory of an existing fortress. This means that a new fortress, A, cannot be placed as long as a field is covered by an existing fortress, B. This change is planned to take effect in future updates. Let us know your thoughts on this upcoming change. Now, I, for one, think this is a very good change. I actually would say, in my opinion, I would push for more aggressiveness in preventing forts from being built on top of each other, personally. I would actually be even more aggressive. I might even say you cannot cover the same footprint of an existing fort at all. But I recognize there's a lot of complexity to this, and I don't know that I want to go into all that complexity now, but let's talk about the reasons why the Alliance forts and these rules needed to change. And the first thing I'll point out is that if you attend my live streams, we talked about this. We talked about how my kingdom, 2605, could not queue for KVK. Why couldn't we queue for KVK? Because we need to have as many as 6 shells, technically a minimum of 6 shells, that can spam forts like this. Now, to do that, you need to have Alliance credits. Well, to do that, you need to have players generating credits. Well, to do that, for every 1 player in our kingdom, each player needs to have 5 accounts generating the maximum credits possible in order to be credit rich enough to queue for KVK and to have it be a viable opportunity to play the KVK. Just think about that for a second. I just told you that in order to play KVK, my 1 alliance of players needs 6 total alliances worth of land that they can build, or we're just going to lose because we cannot build where we need to go. That's a little weird, isn't it? Like, that's a problem, okay? So one way you start to address the credit problem is to say, all right, now you can't build as many forts on top of each other. So the need for forts has gone down. I would argue another way you could start to address this, without actually addressing the fort problem, but addressing the credit problem, is to make it so you can generate more credits. I wouldn't hate that. Right now, our alliance shops are literally empty. We cannot put anything in the shop. I have millions upon millions of, individual currency to spend, but it uses the same alliance credits to fill the shop as it does to drop forts. Well, you can't fill the shop because all you need to do is drop forts. That's what you have to be able to do. So all that to say, there's really several problems. And the credit poor alliance situation all stems from the need to drop all these forts. So changing it so you don't have to drop as many forts is a very good change. Do I think this means that we'll be able to use the alliance shop more? For meta kingdoms, I think the answer is no. It just means you can queue for KVK faster. Now, why would the developers want you to queue for KVK faster? Obviously, every time we go into KVK, you spend speed ups, you spend resources, you buy crystal technology potentially. So like the developers want you to go into KVK faster. And honestly, the whole point of the game, in my opinion, is to enjoy the KVKs and to have good fights. So it just makes sense they want us to get into KVK faster. And I'll tell you, I think I mentioned this already in the video. In 2605, my kingdom, where we've got to be one of the top 30 kingdoms for revenue generated for the game, we are not queuing for KVK for the one and only reason that we did not have enough credits in 6+ shells to do this for a whole KVK. That is the only reason we did not queue last cycle. The one and only reason. That's it. And that's a problem for the game. A huge problem. So that, I think, is the motivation for this change. Now, kingdoms should want to queue for KVK more than ever before because of a number of reasons, especially if you want your rally and garrisons to be kitted out. But first of all, everybody gets more iconic crystals. Kind of important. The iconic stats, the base stats are good. Everybody gets more opportunities to get conquest coins. If you win, or even if you just get your kills, you can get conquest coins, which means your kingdom as a unit is generating more inscriptions. It's generating more of the KVK armor patterns and weapon patterns. You want to get those. And of course, there is the season coins, and you want to get as many of those as you can. So you can go in and get more of the accessories or even just materials and gold heads, right? So the game is nudging us in the direction of fighting for more, fighting KVKs more frequently, but we couldn't do it. So let's talk very briefly and look in game about some of the ways that you can generate more credits. And this change does not change the need to generate huge amounts of credits, but let me show you in game how you generate these credits. Besides donating to Alliance technology, one of the main ways that you cheat out more credits for your Alliance is to fake build things. I mean, technically you're really building something, but nobody actually needs to build this fort. We are fake building this fort to generate credits, which when you say that out loud, it's really silly in a lot of ways that like players kind of need to jump through these hoops to have Alliance credits. Now, you also generate individual credits as you go and do this, but every day you can get 20,000 building credits. The best thing to do is before you go to bed, put one troop into the fort. We've limited it to be only one troop per player, and you will passively sort of build the fort, and then you can retreat your troop home after you have your 20,000 credits. Now, funny enough, an Alliance officer can kick people out of the fort, but they can only kick people out of the fort in KVK. You can't do it in Home Kingdom, which is really weird. I wonder why that's the case. I feel like that's something that ought to change. But you need to be in this fort for, as you can see, more than 4 hours, but less than 6 hours. So this is something I like to do if I'm going to the office, back when I had an office job, or before I would go to bed, right? If you can't access the game for a while, pop your troop in there, and that's better than going out and gathering, okay? Because, gathering takes like an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Okay. Whereas this takes a solid, 5 hours before you have your credits. All right. And you need to do this every day. You need to one troop in a fort, which as a construct is actually nonsense. We are fake building to accumulate credits for the Alliance. Now, the other way you can get some credits is to donate to technology. So you should be donating to technology, and Alliances will spam out their skills, mostly for the purpose of making sure that people can continue to generate credits for the Alliance by virtue of doing their donos over here. In addition, you also get tokens that you can use, which are very important. These are so critical. So just for perspective, here they are in my inventory. These Alliance credits, they're golden and they are worth their weight in gold, let me tell you. I have a ton of these saved up. And I save them specifically. I am like the emergency fort guy, okay? If we are ever in a crisis situation where we cannot build a fort because we do not have the credits, I will go to that shell. I will spam my credits. I have saved for literally years to have a stupid amount of these credits specifically to be able to help build a fort, okay? Critical to be able to do that, I think. But your Alliance officers may tell you, hey, go into this shell, open these credits, or in your main shell, open your credits so we can do something. And what are the other things that Alliances ought to be able to do? They ought to be able to stock their shop. And if I just show you our shop, it's empty. every shop in every meta kingdom in the game is 100% empty 100% of the time. You cannot stock your shop and queue for KVK because you won't have enough credits to actually build forts. The only things that go into a shop and are appropriate are occasional Civ swap tokens, in my opinion, and occasionally you put in passports to get people who are in your kingdom out of the kingdom. And like, if you don't want them in the kingdom, look, it is way better to just eat the stupid cost of the passports, which is really weird. Like, you'd think the main benefit of the shop is to benefit your kingdom, but it's not. Like, the way you benefit your kingdom is by getting rid of the people and truly benefiting the wallets of the people you want to leave by giving them passports. Like, when you start to think about the credit situation, it just doesn't make any sense. It actually is like, what is happening here? So what would I do? I would do a couple things. I would say after this initial change, if the dust is settled and it has dramatically improved the credit situation, maybe nothing needs to be done. Maybe the fort situation is solved. Maybe it is actually no longer a problem where zones are so filled with forts. In fact, dude, I even have pictures of this. This is the problem that we're talking about solving, folks. This is it right here. I personally do not really want to see maps that look like this. This, in my eyes, is not as fun as fighting over flags. So this change, I think, will be very, very, very good for the game. In fact, like, that's just one half of the map. Here's the other half of the map. As a kingdom, the amount of forts you have to build is actually just insane. It's insane. And you can see this is like forts on top of forts on top of forts in a way that, especially like right here, you see these two forts, bid, like, and wid. Like, you won't be able to do that anymore. Sin F on top of Sin F, which, by the way, is like back protected by, I guess, this blue flag line. Like you can't do this anymore. And I'm not trying to call out any one kingdom. It may look like that. That's not at all the case, okay? This is just a KVK I was in where I thought this fort situation does not make the game more fun. It does not. So I think this update is going to address a couple things. It will hopefully start to tackle this situation. I don't think it fully solves it because forts are still stupid powerful and you'll still build them in whatever way you can to manipulate the map. But hopefully it means we need slightly less credits to actually feel like it's viable to queue for KVK. And if that's the case, that's a big win because I'd like to play KVK more and we can't right now because of the credits. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comments about this change. I feel like it is just a good thing. Like, I cannot even find a position to say it's a bad thing for the health of the game unless you actually enjoy this. And if you enjoy gumming up the map, all right then. I mean, hey, if you like the monotony of the fort burning situation where every hour for a week, literally, just think about this. Every hour for a week, you have to muster up people for long enough to burn a fort. You have to pop expansions. You have to pop 10% buffs. You have to go in there with enough people to actually burn it. And then an hour later, you got to do it all over again. And an hour later, you do it all over again. And an hour later, you do it all over again. And an hour later, you do it all over again. And an hour later, you do it all over again. And an hour later, you do it all over again. For literally a week. If you like that, then the way that it works today is better. But I think this new direction, like, I cannot even begin to tell you how necessary I think this change is and how good it is for the game. And it's just a starting point because I would do more. But I also don't blame the developers for doing something, seeing how it goes, and then doing more later because it's been this way for 3 years. So, like, what's the rush, right? If you enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here, consider subscribing. If you want to actually see some KVKs that look like this, I'll have a card in the end screen where we used this fort system to basically prevent people from getting our RCF. One of many reasons why I think the system is actually super toxic for the game. And yeah, alternatively, you might want to check out the Herman Prime video. We tested him the day he came into the game. We also talked about, I think, in that stream, why it is that I think this fort system, as it works today, is not so great. So yeah, there we go. Until next time, you have fun. Smash the kingdom. Take care, everybody.